The light isn't working. I'd like to call the Public Service Committee meeting to order.
Okay.
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 It's okay. It's okay. I'm not mad. I did give you the teacher look, but I'm not mad. All members are here except for Bob Hoke. So Councilman Hoke, I know he's in the building, but eventually he'll make there. But all members are present except for Councilman Hoke right now. May I have a motion on the minutes from our previous meeting? Okay. And I have a motion of acceptance and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing and seeing none. The minutes pass. Public service. We have, on our old agenda, we will be taking time on that.
Time, we're going to hear those, those assessments tomorrow.
Right. So we're going to hear, on the old agenda, I was trying to think of the date of that. We will be holding on those, still taking time on those until they are heard. Okay. And so now we go to what's new before us underneath public service. And our first item, number 9, is an ordinance appropriating funds for the resurfacing of certain state routes and minor bridge work to be completed by the Ohio Department of Transportation, authorizing the Director of Public Service to enter into an agreement or agreements with Ohio Director of Transportation for the resurfacing of certain streets and for certain bridge improvements, requesting the Ohio Director of Transportation to proceed with the project and declaring an emergency. Okay, Mr. Lettle.
Thank you, Madam Chairman and members of the committee. This is an ODOT resurfacing, a bridge repair, and also it's the concrete streets are involved in this. They are going to do concrete repair, so they're going to be removing slabs of concrete and repair them. They're not on on Opportunity Parkway, and they are not going to remove all the pavement, but they are going to do pavement repair. On the other streets, they are going to resurface those streets. So,
thank you. Are there any questions from members of the committee? Any questions from members of council? I would like to make a motion for a suspension of the rules so we get this done, because I have just gotten 3 phone calls today about a road. So,
excuse me, Madam Chair. This is number 9 is the Canton Road Business District, or Kenmore Business District, Canton Road Business District.
I have that as number 10.
I have it as number 9, but we can flip them.
Okay. Is everybody clear what I read in as number 9? I read it off of this sheet of paper. I didn't get into my my iPad. And number 9 was appropriating funds for the resurfacing of certain state routes and minor bridge work to be completed by Ohio Department of Transportation. Is everybody on the same one as me? It says on 10. Okay, but it says 9 on here. So, well, that's what I'm worried about. I just want to make sure we're all voting on the same, what I read in. Okay, how about if we do that? What I read in is what we are voting on. I would like to see, I'm going to make a motion for suspension of the rules. Is there a second? I have a second. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing and seeing none, that will be placed under suspension of the rules for this evening's meeting. Okay. The next one is an ordinance determining to proceed with and levying special assessments for the improvement and maintenance of the off-street parking facilities in the Kenmore Business District and the Canton Road Business District and declaring an emergency. Mr. Love.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. This is our annual assessment for the off-street parking. We received no objections this year. There's no increase from last year, and it's just the true cost of the maintenance that were provided in the last year.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments from the members of the committee? Any questions or comments from members of council? What is your...
Could we suspend the rules? We have to get this...
Okay. Okay, we have a motion for suspension of rules, and I have a second. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing and seeing none, this will be placed on our evening meeting as suspension of rules. The next one, ordinance authorizing the Director of Public Service or his designee to enter into an agreement or agreements with Triban Investment LLC to construct roadway, water, and sewer improvements for the crossings at Old Farm Development and declaring an emergency.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, members of the committee. This is the development agreement to put the infrastructure in roads, water and sewer, and Old Farms Development off of Diagonal.
Are there any comments or questions from members of the committee? Any? Yes, Councilman Fusco.
LS on the funding in the back? Just
That's
curious.
land sale.
Any other questions or comments from members of council? Okay. Councilwoman Sims.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I actually had the same question. What do you mean when you say land sale?
We're selling the land to the developer.
So it's what they pay for the land, is that that's
Yes.
okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
Consent's
your
fine.
preference?
Consent's fine.
Consent? Do I have a motion for consent? Okay, do I have a second? All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing and seeing none, this will be placed on the consent agenda. Is there anything else to come before the Public Service Committee? Okay, we are adjourned.
volunteer? Holly. See if Bob's back there when you walk back there. Oh.
Whenever you're ready, sir.
All right, thank you, Bob. We're going to go ahead and get started with the Public Safety Committee meeting, please. All members are present today, and we have minutes that we need to approve. Can I get approval of those minutes, please? We have a motion, a second by Councilwoman Sims. Thank you. All in favor? Aye. Anybody opposed? All right, so we have 3 new pieces in front of us today. Our first piece, authorizing the mayor or his designee to apply for and, if awarded, accept and expend a grant administered by Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention, or other known as OJJDP, part of the U.S. Department of Justice, Office of Justice Programs to declare an emergency, and we have Deputy Mayor of Public Safety Charlie Brown with us.
Councilman Cameron, thank you, and committee members, thank you. This request for acceptance and expansion of the grant is for a school-based mentoring program with trained volunteer mentors at each school. These individuals will be culturally competent, school-based behavioral health services for children impacted by trauma. They will have improved access to wraparound services for students and their families. And then also it provides for an opportunity to provide a creation of the Police Athletic or Activity League that will provide youth with activities that develop skills such as emotional self-awareness and control, positive social skills, problem solving, conflict resolution, and restorative justice. If it is the committee's favor, we'd like to suspend the rules. And to my left is the Deputy Chief of the Investigative Subdivision, Jesse Leeser, and then to his left is our Law Enforcement Planner, Carol McCullough, if you have any questions.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Any questions from committee members? Councilwoman Sims, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Chairman. So on the plan, it mentioned our current youth violence plan and a portion of the resources being used for that.
Carol, go ahead. Can you repeat the question? I didn't hear it either, so.
I said, in the legislation, it mentioned the youth violence plan, so a portion of the resources that we're looking at for this 3-year grant will be used for that?
This is all to be used. Everything that's in this grant is in the recommendations in the Youth Violence Strategic Plan. So these are all parts of that plan.
So the plan itself looked at age, what's the age group, 15 to 24?
I see what you're saying. Is that, so yes, because we could not include children above 18 in this because OJJDP won't fund those. They will only fund for juveniles as they define them. We are searching for other funding that could potentially address the transitional age youth.
So technically, we're not referencing all the schools in the cluster.
That's correct.
Specifically for this will be just for the high schools, just based on the age category the plan covers, right?
This would be school age in general, these services. We're working in conjunction with United Way and the family resource centers that they're putting in there, so the staffing will sort of be centered there. That way, anyone, regardless of whether they're in kindergarten or 11th grade, would be able to access behavioral health assistance, whether or not they have a diagnosis.
Yeah, I appreciate it. You know, I'm glad that the United Way and the other various partners looking at doing the full wraparounds. But my question is really centered on finding resources to support the youth violence plan. What we targeted, I believe, in the youth violence plan was ages 15 to 24. So if we're including kindergartens, I'm just kind of wondering what real portions of the grant is going towards the plan.
I couldn't really define that because it depends on how many people access the services that'll be provided, but they'll be available for anyone that's within the cluster.
And their families.
Correct.
So I think I get that part. So let me try and restate it. When we looked at the youth violence plan, we specifically looked at a certain age category where we felt that there were the limited amount of resources and the most challenges. And that was the 15 to 24. So my question would be, again, since we said in the legislation, it's for the youth violence plan, what portion of the resources are being used for that? If we're going to kindergarten, because they're not in the plan.
Okay.
So if we're identifying mentors, the mentors, I would imagine, if it's in the plan, is for those who fall in that age category. For this purpose, is going to be between the ages of 15 and 18.
The plan was for this particular grant, and this was something that Fallen Fathers Foundation wanted to do, was to establish a place for mentors in every single school within the cluster. So I guess they're thinking a little bit bigger than just focusing on that, but the resources will be there for that high-risk age group.
Yeah, and they do, Fallen Fathers do an excellent job. They do an excellent research for our community, and I get that, and they do cover the whole gamut. But the legislation, again, referenced the youth violence plan, which we covered specific age groups, which would start for this purpose 15 to 24, since you can't go beyond 15 to 18, since you can't go beyond 18 years old. We have a 3-year grant for $774,000. So are we just spreading that out over all ages, or is there a specific part of this dollar amount that we're earmarking for the plan that covers that age group?
There is no specific set aside for that particular age group. All of these are going to be universal services.
So it would then beg the question, what part of this has to do with the plan?
I would say the various approaches that were suggested are being handled. They're just not targeting that specific age group.
So if it's not targeting that specific age group, I get it. I mean, all of the areas we're going to cover, I think consistent with the work that we did creating the plan, but it doesn't seem like we are purposeful in identifying that group where we felt that was the most challenging and had the least amount of resources. So if you say to me, 60% of the resources are going towards that targeted population, that would make sense. And that would make sense why we have, because potentially the $774,000 could go through grades 1 through 6, correct? Because we...
No. These are all divided up to the different schools, and we're going to work with the community, provided we get this funding, to identify what sort of activities they would like a police athletic activity league to focus on. And if it makes sense to focus on that older population, then that's what we would go forward with the police athletic league. Does that make sense?
It does, but we've already identified what makes sense. That's why the plan that you reference here looked at the age group 15 through 24.
I guess one thing I would like to suggest is that we're also looking at this from a prevention standpoint. So if we can work with kids at a younger age, perhaps they won't be at risk when they're in that 15 to 18-year-old.
But I think and not to label, because I just want to see what kind of resources, because I think that's really important to make sure that the plan is successful, that we put a lot of time and energy into. So the reason why we didn't target that younger age group, because they had other resources. That's why the intention was, it was intentional to identify this group starting with age 15 to 24. And so if we're saying the resources are not earmarked for that group, what does that have to do with the plan?
I understand what you're saying. I would say it has to do with the various approaches that were suggested, which was mentoring, which was behavioral health services. Those were things that were approaches. I understand that we're not targeting the age group that you wanted, but I think that could also be awkward, because then we would be turning kids away from programs.
All right. Sorry.
What?
I mean, it's not awkward. I'm just saying that's what the plan, I mean, that was, all the people who came together to develop the plan, that's the group they identified. And so it's not, you know, it's not in any way exclusionary. The reason why we did it, because we wanted to be more inclusionary, because this population didn't have resources.
Right, and some of these resources will target them. I can't tell you how many because it's going to be based on them using the services.
Thank you. I guess it's thank you, and I do appreciate it, and I think you are correct. Getting as much as we can at the earlier age groups is good. It's excellent. But for the purpose of the plan, that's not what the plan says. So if we don't, it's helpful to know what resources we have to make sure the plan is successful. If we reference the plan, I would imagine that we were referencing the target age groups that we talked about. But it doesn't appear that we're doing that for this grant. And it feels unfortunate because we need resources to make sure the plan is successful.
All right, thanks, Councilwoman, I appreciate that. Any other questions or comments from committee members first? Nothing? Council members in chambers? No? Okay. Oh, Councilman Neal.
Excuse me, sir, sorry for being late. And this may have been covered. I'd like to see the Police Athletic League. I know this is something we talked about a long time ago. Want to know how, and this may have been stated, how you see that working. I know when I was down in Columbus, rather than recreate the wheel, they engaged some programs that were already in place in those areas. East Side Pee Wee football is real big. So they merged in and supported that group, brought resources into that group so that they could be more effective. Down there, they engaged the martial arts programs that were available. So, and I know, you know, like through the NAF program, some of those programs are already working with the police department. So I want to know, how do you envision this working with already institutionalized youth programs within those communities?
It notes in there, Councilman Neal, that it's not just athletics, it's activities. So there are individuals who may not engage through athletics, that can engage through music, that may engage through enrichment programs in the schools. So it won't be just that. And then your comment with respect to reinventing the wheel, those individuals who are, if we are awarded this award, then those some of these we can start doing more granular to look and see what's going to be the best options or the best practices.
Go ahead, Councilman.
No, thanks. That's good to hear. So, Police Athletic League, I automatically thought of sports, of course, and from my familiarity with it down in Columbus. But what I want to know, so if it's even not sports programs, there are other youth programs, again, that's going to be engaging them first before we create something new?
Yes, I'm going to go ahead and speak, okay, Carol. They have contacted Cleveland, so it's not a reinvention of the wheel, so thanks for your comment.
Thank you, Councilman. And with that, I see Councilwoman Amobian raised her hand. You got a question? Yeah. Oh, come
on. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess after that little discussion between Councilwoman and the young lady here, I'm looking at the plan. Is this the plan we were referencing? In the introduction, it clearly talks about targeting the age gap of 15 to 24. So are you talking about using the same resources to cover those earlier years as well? Or are you just talking about using the resources to cover this group?
We would be using the resources to serve anyone within the Akron public school system who wanted assistance. So it's a universal program. The idea here is that we're kind of creating the infrastructure that we can build on and provide more services that are targeted. There were some restrictions with this funding. So for example, in terms of partnering with people, everything has to be done on school grounds. So it can only happen if the program is willing to come onto school grounds to do these programs. That's one of the stipulations of funding. Similarly, we could not target we had to include universal services as a part of this funding. So while we couldn't tailor this grant exactly to the Youth Violence Strategic Plan, we're trying to put together different puzzle pieces of grants that will eventually do what we want it to do.
So I see what you're saying. Because you're restricted because of the property that this has to occur on, you're probably limited to preschool or whatever to 18 or 17?
Correct.
So you're looking at doing something else for the 18 to 24-year-old in addition to this?
That's correct. There's another opportunity that we're looking at that would not have that age limit.
I see. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Any other questions or comments? Yeah, Councilwoman. Yes? No? Good, okay. Any other questions or comments? All right. Charlie, anything else?
No, suspension of the rules, that would be our request if it,
Can we get a motion for consent?
Well, I'll ask the committee for a motion to suspend the rules first, but you're more than welcome to make that motion too. I mean, go ahead, Councilwoman.
Deputy, could you tell me why suspension of the rules? So I have a
absolutely.
better
This,
understanding.
thank you for the opportunity to share that. To this grant, if it's awarded, would be September. The council was off for the entire month of August, so it allows us to get some of these things going a little bit quicker. That's the request, why the request.
Okay.
This,
Well, no, nobody made the motion for suspension of the rules, but I'll take Veronica Sims. She made the motion for consent, so I have to accept that first. So she made the motion for consent agenda. Do I have a second?
I wanted to ask
Okay.
a question.
Well, let me take this vote. I got to take this vote first. So I have a motion for consent. Nobody seconded it, correct? All right. Correct. Now I can move on?
Yes.
Okay. Do we have a motion for suspension of the rules?
Motion for suspension of rules.
We have a motion. Do I have a second? We have a second by Mr. Hoke. All in favor? Aye. Anybody opposed?
Abstain.
We have one abstention. All right, now you can ask your question. Well, let's do a roll call, and then I'll take your question.
Okay.
One more sentence.
Kaner,
Aye.
Keith,
Aye.
Swirsky,
Aye.
Sims,
Abstain.
Hope.
Okay.
4-1.
All right, now,
Actually, 4-1 with one abstention.
Councilman Swirsky, go ahead.
I'll withdraw my question.
Okay. Well, maybe I won't follow the rules, and I'll start breaking them. That's how we want to operate. So with that, we're moving on to the next piece. 13, authorizing the mayor or his designee to apply for and if awarded, accept and expend funding from the FY19 Justice Assistance Grant, other known as JAG, administered through the Office of Criminal Justice Services, OCJS, of the Ohio Department of Public Safety and declare an emergency. Deputy Mayor.
sure, this opportunity will provide 75% of equipment procurement cost to supplement our current efforts to address gun violence in our community through Hotspot Initiative. It is a $44,000 and some change with a 25% match, which is about $11,000. So we would be available to answer any questions from committee members.
All right, thanks. Committee members, any questions? No questions from committee members. Council members in council chambers? No council members. What's your pleasure?
This would be, consent would be fine with this one
Consent.
because it's so late.
Can I get a motion for consent?
Motion for consent?
Second.
I got a motion, a second by Mr. Swirsky. All in favor? Aye. Anybody opposed? All right, that one will be put on the consent agenda. The next piece, I think we're done for you three. Thank you for coming down. I appreciate that. All right, next piece. It's a resolution offered by Councilperson Samples opposing and objecting to the renewal application of Northside Tavern, LLC, 956 North Howard Street, Akron, Ohio, 44310 for a Class D2, D2X, D3, and D6 liquor permit 6451230 now pending before the Division of Liquor Control and declare an emergency. And we have our city prosecutor, Gert Walms, here with us today. Thank you.
Thank you. This location was formerly called Van's Lounge. The permit was ultimately transferred on March 23rd, 2018. Since March of 2018, I'm just going to read off what's been happening at that location. The report of an assault on September 1st, 2018, fights November 3rd, fight November 17th, 2018, verbal fight November the 18th, 2018. A shooting reported by multiple parties on March 30th, 2019, April 1st, 2019, a domestic fight, and this was actually involved an employee of the establishment. After hours complaint, the bar refused the officers to come in to check, which is required. This was May 7th, 2019. May 7th, 2019, a caller calls in seeing a gun in the parking lot. Weapons charge May 30th, 2019. June 24th, 2019, an employee's car received some property damage. July 9th, 2019, an employee was assaulted. And then the most unfortunate incident, the final incident that brings us here today, July 14th, a homicide when the patron left this location. Councilwoman Samples has asked for this liquor permit to be not renewed in the 2020 year. The resolution is pending. And due to, again, the timeliness of council going out for the August break, we would ask for suspension of the rules.
Okay, sounds good. Before I ask the committee if they have any questions, I don't know if the sponsor wants to add anything, Councilwoman Samples.
Thank you. I just echo what Prosecutor Williams has stated. I remember when I first came on council, before they changed the name, they had some issues, and I remember us trying to meet with them and giving them some rules to follow. Because they had a lot of incidents going on, a lot of calls from 666 North Howard of, shootings, and 66 North Howard is a senior citizen high-rise. And so with this last incident, it just seemed like how many more chances and opportunities should they get now that we have a body? My understanding, there was a lot of confusion on the day that this young man was killed up there, where they weren't even being forthcoming with the detectives who were on scene. So to me, I mean, this is a no-brainer. I just think that this is something that should happen automatically whenever there's a shooting in any bar or establishment in the city. There's a gun involved. I think we need to be a lot more proactive in making sure we put in objections, or they just continue to do the things that they're doing. I don't think anyone should have this many complaints before we react, and so I'm going to make it my duty whenever there's an issue like this, especially with gun violence, to request for a liquor license to be revoked. So with that, I hope that I do have council support. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Before I ask committee members, I do have a question, and I hate to ask this publicly, but I will. Do we still have like a task force or individuals that routinely go into these establishments? I don't know if we're allowed, but obviously to investigate any kind of code violations and things like that, to make sure that, we can try to spearhead an effort to make it so it doesn't come to this?
Since our vice, well, I hate to speak for the police department, but being put on the spot, I definitely will. Since the disbandment of the vice unit, it's much more informally. It is still done on a case-by-case basis, but proactive. I got to tell you, it's more of a long-term plan. I know the chief looks at these locations. They have daily meetings about them and ultimately try and deal with it. Our neighborhood response team goes out, but since the vice unit has been disbanded, it's a little less formal than it used to be.
Okay. Well, just if you can do us a favor, I don't want to speak for everyone, but maybe carry on that conversation and go back next time you have any kind of meetings in the future, maybe to really try to address that we need to build that force back up, or that division. So I appreciate that. Any questions from committee members? Nothing. Council members. All right, we have the sponsor asking for suspension of the rules and the prosecutor. Do I have a motion for that, please?
Second.
We have a motion and a second by Councilwoman Swirsky. All in favor? Aye. Anybody opposed? All right, we'll pass that this evening. Thank you for all your hard work, as always. And with that, we're adjourned. Thanks.
Oh, okay. Thanks.
I'd like to call the Rules Committee to order. All committee members are present. I'd like a motion on the minutes from our previous meeting for rules. Do I have a motion on the minutes? Do I have second. And I have a second. I have a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Hearing and seeing none, our minutes pass as they stand. We did have one, well, we have more than one. We have a first reading and a referred, and this was an ordinance authorizing and directing the submission to the electors of the city of Akron, a proposal to amend the charter of the city of Akron to establish nonpartisan general elections, to eliminate municipal primary elections, to establish nomination by petition, all to be voted upon at the next regular citywide election on November the 5th, 2019, and declaring an emergency. We referred this item. I'm going to ask the sponsor of this item, there you are. What is your pleasure?
I would like to vote on it today, but unfortunately, the law department has not made their recommendation, and I think that's what we're waiting for. They said they will have it next week, so I would like to have a vote on it next week. We have till August 7th to place something on the ballot for the November election, so hopefully by next week, the law department will have given their recommendation. So my request is that the committee take time on this.
The sponsor of the piece would like time on this. Is there a motion for time?
So moved.
I have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay. Hearing and seeing none, we will refer this item to next week. Okay, and the other two items that are on our old agenda, I would like time on still, and then let's go to what we have new on the agenda. Under rules, number 1, resolution urging the Ohio Secretary of State and the Ohio General Assembly to create a process by which independent or nonpartisan voters may vote in a political party's primary without declaring for that party and declaring an emergency. And would the sponsor of this piece care to speak on this first, and then we'll open it up to the committee?
Thank you, Madam Chair. This was something that I had been working on for some months now and talking back and forth with our Secretary of State and reached out to our state reps on, is creating a process where independent voters would be able to vote in a primary election without declaring a party. Now, how does that happen? Well, first, it would have to go through the state legislators process and secretaries of state. It's not something we can do here on a local level. But in order for individuals who are independents, right now they can only vote on issues. This way, if they pass it the state level, they would be able to go into the voting location, they would be able to pull a ballot and not be forced to be aligned with a political party. A lot of people think that this is a bad idea, but when you have, and here are the numbers, but there's a lot more people who support it who thinks it's a bad idea. In the state of Ohio, there are 7,862,578 registered voters. 2,054,814 of those are Republican. 1,310,608 are Democrats. 4,497,156 are independent voters. Those are individuals who aren't even voting in primaries. So we have to now ask ourselves, are they sitting out because they don't want to declare a party? And we have to think a lot of these individuals would vote if they could just go in and get a ballot. The thing I think is more concerning is when it almost seems like we're doing a disservice to voters when we're telling them unless you declare a party, you're only allowed to vote on issues. If you don't declare a party, you can't vote for a candidate. And I think we're leaving a lot of people sitting at home because we do that. So what I'm asking is for our Secretary of State and Ohio General Assembly to come up with a plan and a ballot where they can actually vote for candidates and not feeling the pressures of if they don't declare a party, they can't vote for a candidate. I think if this is the democratic way to do it. If we say we live in a democracy, we should be allowing all people to vote. And I think that if we do that, then we will have a better turnout in our primary elections. So I hope that I do have support of this committee. And, you know, to look at the numbers, these are numbers from 2018. They are due to be updated after the census. OhioVoterProject.org, all the numbers are there. If we look at Summit County by itself, we have over 205,000 independent voters right here in Summit County. That's staggering. Only 82,000 of them are Republican. Only 72,000 of them are registered Dems. And this is Summit County. So when you talk about we have over 200,000 independent voters here in Summit County, there's a reason why no one is showing up. And no one wants to be honest about it. They don't want to declare a party. So if we really, really care about making sure people vote, let them vote. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilwoman Samples. I would, if you could provide for all of council those numbers that you just quoted. I did not write them down, but if you could provide for all of council. And I'm going to be very honest with you. I have not researched this so much, so I would really like to delve into it just a little bit more. So having said that, I would like to open it up now to members of the committee. And Councilman Freeman, it looks like you have something you want to say.
Actually, I was going to make a motion for time. I'd like to look at this for the next.
Oh, good. Okay. Is there any comments or concerns before I take that vote? Wait from the committee first, and then I'll be happy to go to you. Are there any other questions or concerns from members of the committee? Seeing none, Councilman Kilby.
Oh, thank you, Madam Chairman. I'd like to ask the sponsor a couple questions. Yes. So, have you talked to Frank LaRose, Secretary of State, on this?
I have.
What did he say? What does he think the possibility of something like this happening?
He said he has to speak to the legislator. He still has to speak to individuals from the House down there. Well, it's not a decision he can make on his own.
I would support this, but I think it's kind of unlikely to happen. I think that's why it's important for us to have nonpartisan elections right here in Akron, Ohio, and that's why I sponsored that. Have you talked to Mr. Bevan about this? Has he What did he have to say if you talked to him?
I'm sure he's aware of it today.
Okay, has
I'm
he
sure he's
talked to,
gotten a
have you
copy
talked
of
to him about it?
I have.
Okay, what was his opinion?
I've spoken with him, and I've spoken with Frank LaRose. Don't be surprised. There is support from both sides of the
Okay,
party.
so-
If we want people to show up to vote, you have to give them an opportunity.
I understand that, I support that idea. So what did Mr. Bevins say? He supports this?
Well, he didn't say if he supported it or not, but I sent it to him.
Okay, so basically, I think the reason he probably isn't going to object to it is because it's not likely to happen.
Well,
And that's why he has vehement objections to the other proposal, which would do away with the party politics here in Akron, Ohio. So a resolution is fine and dandy, but I don't see it happening. My opinion, they're not going to do this. So it's a safe thing for us to vote for, and I don't think the party bosses are going to object to it because it's not likely to happen. So that's just my opinion.
Okay, you're entitled to your opinion.
Thank you. Any other council members have comments or concerns? Councilwoman Sims.
So I greatly appreciate the stats, but I'd be interested in knowing, I know for me, talking to some of the young folks who don't participate in the primary election, didn't know the difference between the primary in general. And so do we know why people are not voting? Is that, do we know, is there any information around that specifically speaks to the partisan issue versus they just don't want to?
May I suggest that maybe that's something that we look into in this time that we have? We have time, unless the sponsor of this piece has definite information right now, I would suggest that's something that we look into. Us individually, they have questions about that.
Very detailed. I'll send it to everyone to look through it. I've been working on this for almost a year now.
Go ahead and speak into the microphone so we have that on record.
So this is something I've been working on for almost a year now. So I will disseminate the information to everyone so they can look at the numbers. And there's a reason why people show up during presidential years and they don't show up in off-year elections. There's absolutely a reason for it, but it's very detailed, and I'll send it all over to everyone.
So is it speaking specifically to, for Ohio? I'd like to see some information on Ohio, and if there was any effort to try to discern why people aren't doing the primary. Why aren't they declaring parties other than they just, I don't know. Because the only reason why I'm asking, because again, when I'm out talking to folks too, they still have questions about the difference between a primary and a general election. So is there a piece there that centers on education versus whether people just don't declare a party?
So currently, the educational component of it is being worked on by our current Secretary of State, and I know he's put forth a big effort of meeting with organizations across the state, which is unheard of by a Secretary of State. And he's probably met with every NAACP across the state to address that issue right there. And so I've been giving him time to put that portion of it together so we can look at ways where we can energize and synergize individuals who don't feel the need to show up because they feel disenfranchised. So I don't want to step all over his toes because he is the Secretary of State, but it is something that I have spoken extensively with him and others about in Columbus. And what I have access to, I will make sure I send to you all.
Thank you, Councilwoman. That's generous, and I think we're going to have a lot of questions, but I think that's where we spend our time now, is researching those answers to those questions that we have. Councilwoman Amobian, did I see your hand?
Thank you, Madam Chair. My guess is probably just as good as anybody else's. Part of what we find when we talk to individual voters, when we're campaigning, is that people don't seem to make the connection between their local elected officials and their basic needs. They don't seem to make that connection. that is the folks that you touch and see every day are the folks that have more of an impact in your lives than those in Washington or Columbus. That's one of the things. Why they don't choose to vote, I don't have a clue, other than the fact that I don't think they get excited about whatever we are doing or not doing. The other thing that I know that is happening at the state level, and I'm not really sure if it's the governor or is the Secretary of State, it could be the Secretary of State that's pushing this, is actually trying to get in touch with local leaders to help them around this purging of voters. They're asking people to go out and knock on doors to make people aware that their registration is going to be purged unless they exercise it, go up and update things. That seems to be more of an effort that's being made by anyone at the State House in a long time, particularly of the other party. So there are some efforts being made to do some things, but why people don't vote, that's probably anybody's guess. I know that there are people out there sending out ballots and doing polling, but it's almost the same information that all of us seem to know, that people just don't have much interest, and I'm not really sure why.
Thank you. Are there any other comments from members of council? Seeing none, I believe that our sponsor said time, she was amicable to time, so I would like a motion for time. Or did you already make the motion? May I? And I've got a second here. So we already have, Councilman Freeman made the motion, Councilman Fusco seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing and seeing none, this will be placed, we'll refer this item. Number 2, under our new legislation and rules, ordinance amending and supplementing Title III, Administration, Chapter 30, Mayor and Council, Sections 30.11, limits on monetary and in-kind contribution and loans of the Akron Codified Ordinances and declaring an emergency. Okay, the sponsor of this particular piece, if you would care to speak on it.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This kind of goes along with the discussion that was taking place on why voters are disenfranchised, why they don't participate. I think a lot of it is because of the politics. Legislators not using the political process to get things done, but the politics. The two parties, the Democratic and the Republican Party, are the parties that we see on the news all the time, and it's the politics that people are tired of. But this piece of legislation here is more so to deal with trying to instill trust in the process. So what's being brought forth, at one time, Council, I believe Councilman Fusco brought a piece in asking us to increase the campaign finance limits. I don't know if this is the exact amount, but it was 1,000 for at-large and mayoral candidates, and it would move it from 500 to 750 for regular ward council persons. So brought this in because the caveat to this is one of the challenges, and it was mentioned several times in the Beacon, was the influence of PAC money in our races. And so to remove that cloud over our races, this piece would increase the campaign limits that persons running for mayor or council could receive, but would remove the PAC money. Now, there were two articles. The one article when it spoke about the quandary of two mayors spoke about how almost $500,000 was raised in PAC money during the 2015 election. I mean, I know that's a part of politics, but what was disturbing in that article was about how the persons that raise that money in those PACs are the same people who get contracts with the city. That's disturbing. And so I think as a way to remove that cloud from our elections, combined with some of the other efforts that we're discussing, we would be able to reinstill the trust in Akron residents in our elections.
Thank you. Is there anyone on the committee that would choose to make comment on this particular ordinance? Later? Okay, anyone in council chambers that would like to make comment? Councilwoman Samples.
So I have a question for Councilman Neal. As I read through here, I was wondering, do you know the way that it is currently written, is there a constitutional issue as it relates to Citizens United? Will this conflict with their law that's already it's already law of the land?
That was something that I discussed with the member of the law department that drafted the legislation. The law department is looking into that.
Okay.
But again, I think what's important is the integrity of our elections. There's every law that exists on the books at one time may not have been law, and there are laws that are not on the books because of the ethical reasons that citizens rose up to take them off the books. We can name multiple ones. So I think, again, this one is concerning our elections. The law department is looking into that, but there is no question. Like I said, it wasn't given as supporting document. I sent the link to the article so that everyone can read it.
Okay.
But
lastly, I know where it says to prohibit funds from a PAC, but we know a lot of the unions, when they give money to candidates, at least locally, they usually give it through their PACs. So this will prohibit them from giving us money if they endorse us?
I think let me read through here, because in the initial legislation that came out, let's see here. Where it says no person, it lines out political PACs, but there was a piece in there where it said it didn't obstruct from labor unions. I don't see, it was in the piece that came through that I approved. I have to find it in here, but that's something we could check with our law department on.
All right, thank you.
Is there any other questions or comments for Councilman Kilby?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'd like to ask the sponsor a couple questions.
Yes, sir.
First off, these PACs, is there any limits at this point? They don't have to conform to the limits we have from individual contributors? They don't, the ones we have in place now, are they exempt from those limits?
You know, I have to be 100 transparent. I'm not sure. My concern is that the PACs aren't identified like as easily as individuals.
Right.
My concern is that the article stated that it was the folks that make up these PACs that get the contracts with the city.
Yeah.
That influence the policy of the city.
I don't have no doubt that that takes place, but I just would like to know if there's limits presently on how much a PAC can give to a candidate. Does anybody know?
Yes, it's a limit.
It's the same limit that we have
same
for
limits that we have to
individuals?
live with.
Okay. All right. Secondly, do we know who these people are that contribute to the PACs? Is that public information down at the Board of Elections that we can go look up a PAC and see who gave money to it?
Okay, I believe you're asking that of the sponsor, so.
You can look it up right now, so.
You can look it up.
Excuse me.
But the individuals are listed. Okay.
Okay, what I want to do is, just with the meeting is, Councilman Kilby, you have the floor and you were asking your questions
okay.
of the sponsor.
All
So
right.
let's make sure it's the sponsor
Right.
who answers right now.
All right, so they are identified if somebody cares to go down there and look it up. Can you look that up online, do you know? I mean, or do you have to go
You
to...
can look up people's campaign finance reports.
But the PACs, can you look up a PAC online and see who contributed to the PAC?
I believe so.
Okay. All right, so I personally think this is a good idea, and I will support it if it comes to a vote.
Is there anyone else that has a question or concern? Okay. Councilman Fusco.
Thank you. I think we're confusing super PACs and regular PACs that are registered with the state of Ohio. And I believe the super PACs, I'm not sure if they have to be registered by the state of Ohio or not, or how that exactly works, but it's kind of like apples and oranges, okay? The PACs, whenever you file your campaign finance report, there's a registration number through, I believe it's the federal government that's got to be registered, and you have to report that. And this does, in fact, I agree with my colleague, Samples, in terms of, the super PACs. That's the Citizens United piece that the United States Supreme Court ruled on. That piece there is no real disclosure, from what I understand, the way, and I don't agree with the way that's designed. However, this one here, the way it's designed, that you're talking about in your legislation, it would eliminate local labor groups. It would eliminate local groups that are registered nonprofits that have established PACs that we all report and that are registered with the state of Ohio, okay, as I believe in the federal government. So that would just totally eliminate, and already, we disclose that in our reports. Already that's disclosed. I think it's also important to note, too, the basis for the campaign contributions, which is voted upon by the voters, that we currently have is probably the lowest in the state of Ohio, maybe even the United States. And in terms of, the research I had done whenever I introduced my piece indicated that we were the lowest for sure in terms of PACs and in terms of parties, without question. Cleveland, Columbus, the other places out there, their contribution limits were higher than the individual limits, okay? They were much higher in many cases. It's also important to note, too, that that within the legislation under item 30.11 G, council shall review and amend, if necessary, the contribution limits every 2 years beginning in 2012 and continuing in each even-numbered year. And I believe it was brought up to eliminate politics, and I think this is an odd-numbered year that we're currently in. So I think the voters, in their wisdom, whenever they had passed this, in 2010, November 2nd of 2010, that they were trying to eliminate politics by stating that this should be addressed in an even-numbered year. And that was during the time that we had 2-year terms. Okay, in 2012, it was determined by the voters that we have 4-year terms. However, I think in the wisdom of the voters, in terms of saying, this should be addressed in an even-numbered year, that's where it's in the legislation here that it should be in an even-numbered year, and so that's what I would say that needs to be considered as well.
I appreciate your comment.
Councilman Neal.
Okay, I'm sorry, because he was addressing the questions to me, so I thought it was, yeah. Well, I appreciate your comment. Knowing how it takes us time to get legislation through here, and knowing that this would have to, go before the voters, and knowing that next year is the year of charter review, wanted to bring this out so that the discussion could start now. Wanted to bring it out why the information relating to the influence of PACs in our city and how those PACs are, the persons that make up those PACs are awarded contracts. Again, remember, nothing is a standalone. When we talk about the institutional practices that have existed within this city, that have disenfranchised folks from being able to participate in the economic opportunities here, the politics is connected to that. Remember, there's 4 pillars of this institutional racism, institutional inequity that exists. Economics and commerce, the politics, the education system, and the religious institutions. We have direct opportunity to deal with one of them. This was stated to us as far as in black and white. And this is the first time it came before us. In a court jester way, through an editorial cartoon, they let us know the politics and how money played a role in it back in 2015. So bringing this piece of legislation, knowing the process and the difficulty of getting things through this body, so that the discussion could start now.
Are there any comments from other members of council? Hearing, Councilman Fusco.
Just that, yeah, I'm a little confused because it almost sounded as though the sponsor had mentioned something about going before the voters. I didn't see that in here, so I don't know if this is to go before the voters or not. And also, I believe there's also confusion in terms of the kind of PACs that exist out there. I believe that super PAC that I was talking about before, that's totally different than the other kinds of PACs. And I think everyone needs to, study that, educate themselves on this before we even vote on this. I think that's important to understand that there's 2 different types here, and this here type is totally different than the one that is being spoke about in reference to the sponsor of this. Thank you.
Councilman Fusco, I couldn't agree with you more because I am not as well versed on PACs as I feel I need to be able to vote on this today. In fact, if a vote were called for, I would have to abstain, which is a no vote. But in my opinion, it means I don't know enough at this point right now to be able to vote with enough knowledge and knowingly. So I hear what you're saying, and I appreciate it. Councilman Neal.
Yes, Madam Chair, again, as I stated, knowing the difficulty sometimes of moving things through, and when I say difficulty, I mean just because we all have to get a certain level of understanding. We've had legislation that has sat on the docket for a year and a half, 2 years sometimes. This is here because, again, there was a supporting piece that should have came in with it, with the article that referenced the type of PAC. I gave that information to the law department when they drafted this piece. So if there's a problem there, you may want to direct that to the law department because I gave them the article that specifically spoke to the PACs that influence the elections in this city, that specifically outlined the PACs that get the contracts from this city. I gave that to our law department. So I am, we don't have to rush this, but it is our duty and our due diligence as a council to address it.
Thank you. Are there any other comments from members of council? Seeing none, is there a motion that we should? There's a motion to refer. Is there a second? I have a second from Councilman Freeman. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing and seeing none, this item will be referred. And is there anything else to come before the Rules Committee? Seeing none, we are adjourned.
Economic Development will meet in 1 minute, 30 seconds.
Oh.
There was a typo, so they brought in a new one.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can you see that schedule right out there, sir?
Yes, it is.
It's been there. It's been there since you were elected. That's why I highlighted it. Because you're not the first and won't be the last. When's the next meeting? Who is it? What time does it start? Oh, we got the FOP a little early. Ooh, yeah. I love it.
I'd like to call the Economic Development Committee to order. Can I get an approval for the committee meetings from June 10th?
Motion for approval.
Can I get a second? All in favor? Any opposed? The minutes passed. We have three pieces coming before us this morning. Item number 15. 2019, to approve amendments to the Articles of Incorporation of the Akron Summit County Energy Special Improvement District Incorporated and declaring an emergency. Hello, Mr. Fricker.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is the first of two pieces related to the Energy Special Improvement District we set up back in 2017. We have Chris Burnham here from the Summit County Development Finance Authority, which kind of administers the ESID. He's going to speak a little bit on the second piece, which is related to residential PACE. The first piece is related to the Articles of Incorporation for the ESID. So when we set the ESID up, and if you remember, the ESID basically is a mechanism to finance energy improvement projects using a mechanism called PACE financing, which is property assessed clean energy. So basically, the property owners can do energy improvement projects and then pay for them by being assessed over a period of 5 or 10 years and basically amortize that cost over a period of several years. So the ESID was set up, and it currently enjoys a tax-exempt status. Which means that the income that flows through the ESID is minimal. It's basically just fees that kind of, cover the cost of administering the program, but that is all tax exempt. So the council for the ESID wanted to enhance our tax exempt status. So we are amending our articles of incorporation to do a couple things. One is kind of modify the mission of the ESID. It's not really modifying the mission, but it's the mission that's stated in our articles of incorporation, that this is a public benefiting agency. So the improvements that we see to the environment through energy conservation and the jobs created with these projects has a public benefit. And then two, it is modifying the makeup of the board of directors of the ESID. So currently, there are 3 members of the board that could come from outside of a political subdivision, and then each political subdivision will nominate 2 members to the board. This makes sure that there's a supermajority of public sector board members in the future. So it's just a couple modifications to our articles of incorporation to further enhance our tax exempt status.
That further ensures that the focus remains public.
Correct.
Thank you so much. Thank you, first of all, publicly, for taking extra amount of time this morning again, to help me to get a better understanding. Is there any questions from the committee? Any questions from members of council in the chamber? Hearing none, what's your pleasure?
Consent agenda, please.
Can I get a motion for consent? Can I get a second?
Second.
All in favor? Thank you. You guys have it. Our next piece of legislation, item number 16, approving the Akron Summit County Energy Special Improvement District Residential Program Plan, authorizing and approving the execution, delivery, and performance of the city's residential PACE cooperative agreement with respect to property assessed clean energy transactions in cooperation with the Akron Summit County Energy Special District and the Toledo-Lucas County Port Authorities. Authorizing Toledo-Lucas County Port Authorities to approve petitions and plans for public improvement or public service submitted by the owners of real property within the city requesting that their properties be added to the territory of Akron Summit County Energy Special Improvement District and assess for the cost of such plan on behalf of the council of the city and declaring an emergency. Mr. Fricker.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So to date, the ESID has been set up to do commercial-only projects, so businesses, and then also some of the cities that exist within the ESID, and I think we're up to 12 or 13 cities now. Yeah, so Chris will kind of go through that. But currently, it's only commercial projects. So this will extend it to allow us to do residential projects. So these are energy improvement projects that homeowners could do related to HVAC projects, solar projects, roofing, water conservation, those types of things. Anything that qualifies as an energy improvement project. This will allow those homeowners to finance those through PACE financing and then pay them back through being assessed, just like they are right now for like a resurfacing project or a street project. So Chris is going to kind of take you through how the process would work in terms of administering the residential PACE program.
So I've got a couple things I'd like to pass out. I'm not sure the best way to do that.
Steve, turn his microphone on.
Kind sir, if you can pull your mic closer to you and turn it on so we can hear you. Thank you.
Let's pull it forward.
Okay, all right. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Like Steve said, I'm Chris Burnham, the president of the Development Finance Authority here in Summit County. We're the administrator of the Akron Summit County Energy Special Improvement District. The documents that are being passed out show the communities that have joined the ESID since Akron initiated it and helped create it when we first did the One Cascade Plaza project. You'll see we're about half the county now, and we actually have 2 communities that have adopted residential PACE. City of Barberton and Copley Township, and it's pending before Cuyahoga Falls, Talmadge, and Norton. Couple things about the PACE program and the specific program we're implementing. It's a company called Renovate America. They're out of California. They already work in Missouri and Florida. We'll be the fourth state to introduce residential PACE. In Ohio, it's Summit, Lucas, Franklin, and Cuyahoga will be following shortly. So those three counties are in the process of implementing it, and we're the first state and the first public entities in the country to introduce consumer compliance with the rollout of the PACE program. The second handout that I provided has some consumer protection information that we have worked with Renovate to adopt, and Renovate has competitors, and any other residential PACE competitors that come into Summit County will have to comply with these consumer protections or they won't be able to work here. And the reason I know that is the residential plan is enforced by the ECID, which gets to the reason why we wanted to make sure that it always had a majority of public officials on it that Steve talked about a few minutes ago. So this is really oriented toward middle class, working class homes, that we have many of across Akron and Cuyahoga Falls and many other communities in our county. You must have a minimum FICO score. There are debt-to-income ratios that calculate the resident's ability to pay. You can see the combinations of mortgages and assessments cannot exceed 97%. People have to be current on their mortgage, no involuntary liens over $5,000, no notices of default. The reason we know this will be enforced is we rolled this out a few weeks ago. We used the K Company as a place to roll it out. Renovate has the responsibility for vetting and ensuring that the contractors that it uses follow these compliance factors, and they're going to be built into a technology platform that it will give to all of its contractors. So let's say if Jennings Heating and Cooling becomes a Renovate contractor, I know that Jennings has different financing mechanisms they can provide a resident. They can give them an option of ways to do something, say a new furnace. One of those options will be you could pay for that through a special assessment on your home over time. So it's voluntary, completely on the part of the homeowner. It'll show up on the tax duplicate. And whatever the homeowner is financing, whether it's a roof or a furnace or new windows or something like that, the timing of the assessment will relate to how long that useful life is of that improvement. So for something that might be a short payback period, it would be a short-term loan. Their rates are about 2.99%. Something for more long-term improvement, the rates go up to 8.99%. So it's all up to the resident. It'll be up to the contractor with the technology platform to determine if the resident complies. And then there is a know before you owe call that a Renovate person will provide to the homeowner to make sure they completely understand what they're doing before the deal closes. And then the contractor does not get paid till the resident signs off that they're happy with the work. So that's it in a nutshell.
Thank you. I do have any questions from the committee? I just have a couple of questions. So is the difference between determining compliance versus eligibility? Who is determining eligibility?
That ultimately resides with Renovate, although you'll see that the Toledo Port Authority was referenced here. When Renovate came to Ohio, the energy special improvement legislation is pretty cumbersome. It's not easy to deal with. And it would be a challenge for them to streamline and amend Ohio law, so they got the idea that they could work with a port authority. We're a port authority under the law. We've actually financed things in like 9 counties. In talking to the metro ports, who is best suited to do this work, it's Toledo. They've got a long record in the energy efficiency space. They got a big staff. They're set up to do this. So Toledo has the responsibility in Ohio to administer the program in tandem with Renovate. Our job is to educate the public to the best of our ability. That's the answer. It's self-policed by Renovate, administered to the Toledo Port Authority.
How will people find out about this? And could
Well,
you
we're
talk a little bit about who's eligible to qualify?
Mr. Swirsky, did you have a question?
Well, I raised my hand. I thought you said okay.
No, it's fine. Mr.
Sorry.
Councilman Swirsky.
Well, I think people are going to find, the rollout's going to take some time. Renovate doesn't want to commit a lot of resources to hiring people and putting boots on the ground until it's clear that we're going to have a lot of communities signing up for the program. They don't want to spend a lot of time vetting the contractors and all of that, training them on the technology platform until they know we have communities joining the program. So they're telling us probably the end of the year at the earliest, beginning of the first quarter of 2020, they'll be able to have contractors eligible to do this work. And until then, we put a link on our website, so as people call or ask questions, we're sending them to Renovate to get answers and get them in the queue for the program.
I mean, could we be helpful that way as city council people?
Yeah, I think so. Working through the administration, working through the council. Steve's a member of our board, so we can set up some type of platform to help, get people the word out.
No, you go ahead, Mr.
So could you summarize who's eligible to qualify? I'm reading these things here, minimum FICO score, 620. You want to explain that a little bit, break that down a little bit?
Well, we're trying, I think what Renovate wants is, there have been, I think the things that they're implementing here on the front end, they would have done back in the beginning. You're wiser by doing things. Yeah. So it's meant to ensure that people have the ability to make the assessment payment, basically. And frankly, I think if you live in Firestone Park and your mortgage is paid off and you need a new roof, this is probably a great vehicle for you to be able to finance that. Or if you have a furnace that breaks down in the middle of winter and you need to get it back on and you might use your credit card in an emergency, this could be a great way to finance something like that if you meet these basic credit scores.
And what about solar? You mentioned that.
Solar's eligible. In California and Florida, alternative energies may be more popular than what we think will be popular here, which are things like new windows, new roofs, and new heating and cooling to keep your house cool and warm in the winter.
Any more questions, Mr. Council? Mr. Swirsky?
You look like you have more questions.
Well, just to give other people a chance. But on solar, can you partner with some of the solar companies?
That would be something that Renovate would answer. I don't know the answer to that question. But I think if a resident wanted to use solar energy, this is a way to finance that improvement. Renovate's a financing vehicle. That's all it is. They're not providing the solar panels. They're not doing the home improvement. They're working with contractors who do that work.
Right.
They're a means to finance the work.
One second, Mr. Councilman Fusco. Just a quick question. So, this, actually, after our conversation, this is the first time I really heard about Renovate. I didn't know there was a third party. So to Councilman Sworsky's inquiry about how do people know, will we as a county, as a city take on that responsibility? That's one part. But as far as who approves the applications, since I was under the impression, because Toledo Lucas is the largest port authority and has the most staff resources and the most experience in this arena, that they would be doing that work. Is that true?
That is true.
Okay, good. Thank you. Councilman Fusco?
Thank you. Son, the question is if they're the administrators, the Renovate folks, or what have you, is there like a charge for the residents for their services, or how's that handled?
The rate has their fees all baked in. So when I said 2.99 to 8.99, that includes their fee.
Now, this is something we had talked about before, about maybe neighborhoods pulling together and assessing for things such as this, as well as things such as, it would be nice to see, you know, for example, if a number of senior citizens would get together and have someone plow, you know, so on and so forth, within a neighborhood structure. But this obviously is a little different, but it seemed like our stumbling block was always the administration piece of it, and that's where they fit. And I think this is a great program. Sounds very interesting and could be beneficial. Thanks.
Any questions from the committee?
Yeah, you talk about new jobs created. You want to explain that a little bit? How that is that purely in?
Well, when we were asked to do this by the county, because we were the administrator of these, it made sense. And part of the logic for that is, you know, there could be some jobs that come out of this given the people that'll be trained to do the work. You know, create jobs, improve home values, reduce the carbon footprint, and seemed like three good policy objectives for us to be pursuing as a community.
I agree totally.
Councilwoman Key.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First off, I want to thank Chris Burnham. I've had the opportunity to work with him over the years, and I'll tell you, this doesn't come forward lightly. This comes forward with a lot of thought and determination of what is best for our city. And I believe if possibly we've never been in the position with the furnace going in the middle of winter and no income coming in because we are on a fixed income. But I want to thank you for the opportunity that you have brought forth to our city to be able to look at this and decide how it's going to benefit. And all I see it is a plus for my residents and those here in the city of Akron. So I want to thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman Keith. Well, let me say this. You know, when I look at the ESED, the first piece that we've done, and we've been doing this for a little while, I feel like we're experts, but I also felt like those were big boys and girls who could handle their business. These are businesses, they know it. But when we talk about, when we roll this out to the residents, I think we need to be a lot more refined, one, to ensure their protection. And so I do have a little more dis-ease because I didn't know about the third-party person, and I'm not sure if I really know who's watching the gate, so to speak. And so I'm glad I don't think you're asking for a suspension of the rules today, but I think
we're just asking for consent, yeah.
Yeah, I think what would be helpful to know is, one, what is our plan to make sure that our residents know? Two, to know emphatically who is responsible for approving the applications. I hear us say, then I hear us say kind of renovate. And I mean, I'd be interested in knowing, that's a big gap between 2.99 and 8.99 in interest. Is that based upon the type of work, if we're doing a whole roof solar panel, or if we're doing an HVAC system?
It's based on the useful life of the improvement. So just like we do when we finance, capital projects that we do here in the city, if it's typically the rate, the longer the term of the financing is, the higher the rate is. So it follows that premise.
Okay.
I would offer one more answer to your questions. I mean, Toledo really has the responsibility for administering under a cooperative agreement with those 4 counties. As it gets larger, it'll be the same thing. Renovates the financing vehicle. They police the contractors. But Toledo, and you actually will have a role annually, just like other special assessments, you have to certify the special assessments of the residents that are in Akron and provide that information to Toledo, and Toledo's got the responsibility for ensuring that that information's correct too before it goes on to renovate. So there are some safeguards in place, and we've been working on this for like 3 years.
That's beautiful. So this would ask another question, since we're in this cooperative arrangement. Is the intentionality there to identify local contractors, or will we be looking for Toledo to identify the contractors?
We're asking communities to help us identify local contractors, and if you have those, I'd like to know who they are, and we'll get them to renovate and because they're going to get the training. And the Renovates from San Diego, it really is it's a technology platform that they have that once the Know Before You Owe call is approved, that technology goes right to the county fiscal office to let them know that this project's moving forward.
Okay. Excellent. I think it's just that it goes a long way at getting at some of the issues around creating local opportunities if we're intentional about doing that piece. And then it would go to how are we disseminating that information that folk know that this opportunity is available here locally and that they will get provided the training necessary to be successful. So, any more questions from members of the committee? Councilman Neal?
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is exciting. Looking forward to learning more. Several things came to mind as I was listening to this. One, for it to be successful, I mean, I think of one flagship CDC in our community, East Akron Neighborhood Development Corporation. What made them so successful was the partnering arm of East Akron Community House, which organized the community, the block clubs, created something broader and stronger than just block clubs, like a neighborhood association. I know we have talked about that in this chambers before. I think this right here is something that's going to be critical for council to work with those neighborhoods that may not have an EANDC or really they're the most mature CDC. So I look forward to learning that. The other thing that came to mind, and this is when I look at the economic opportunities, I was glad to hear when you said if we have someone that they could be connected and learn. Within Akron, we've committed to making things more equitable and inclusive. And that's my concern, especially when we talk about economic development. And so the thing that, when I read this piece, when it came through, and I see that we're working with all these different communities, is, especially since the report spoke to Akron and Summit County, it's imperative that we develop a tool that is used, and when I say a tool, an equity tool that we use to make sure that we are as inclusive as possible, especially if we're partnering with outside partners. So that, and so I'm looking at how can we do that. I mean, we can't wait another month or 2 months because these opportunities are coming now. We have to shape this and structure this correctly. So, like I said, this is excellent. Want to learn more about it, because if in my limited understanding, I'm envisioning a way to empower residents to, to take control of the housing stock in their communities. Like I said, I'm excited, but I do want to make sure that, again, and now I'm speaking on my understanding of how When you put equity in, it's not just limited to one little piece. It runs through every fiber of our governance. And until we establish a tool that we're sure of, when we're talking about working in JEDs and working in conjunction with other communities, because it shouldn't just stop just because we're working with them. We have to help educate them because this impacted not just Akron, but Summit County. So that was my thing. But I thank you I look forward to learning more.
Thank you, Councilman Neal. So last question for me. On the cooperative agreement, what's the sunshine on that? Is it 2 years, 3 years, 4 years? How long is the agreement?
I think that's just, to me, that's an evergreen agreement. I've never heard of having a cooperative agreement have some type of, as long as it's in effect, it's open. I mean, I'm not a lawyer, but I've always taken that approach to public policy.
So our agreement is for never?
Until, that's another key point to this. You can opt out of the plan. You don't like the plan, you opt out.
We have a clause for opting out.
Definitely.
But, okay, so
every
it's not,
community.
okay.
I'm sorry, I thought you meant in terms of the, public review of the cooperative agreement. It's a public document.
Okay, no,
Yeah.
I just want to know how long we agreed to stay
You
in the
opt
park.
in, you can opt out.
Okay, thank you very much.
All
Any
right.
more questions come before the committee? Councilwoman Amobian.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. A couple questions. Is NLC aware of this program, National League of Cities?
I would think so, but I don't know.
That'd be nice to make them aware, because I can see other communities being interested. Individuals with FICO scores that are lower than 620. And here's my thinking, because a number of the homes that I see throughout the city that are badly in need of some of the things you've talked about, is there a way for them to partner? Like, we have different grants and programs as a city. If we could use some of those funds and those individuals can use part of their resources, as limited as they are, is there a way that we could bridge that to make them eligible for some of this? Because that's part of the problem.
Yeah, I know.
The scores are pretty low probably, and they have a hard time finding any type of funding to take care of their problems.
You know what, as we kind of talked through having some kind of floor, a lot of the reason was what happened in what led up to the Great Recession was people being taken advantage of and taking on more debt than they could pay. So we knew that there were other programs that could help people that fall below this. I know the resources aren't great, but we really wanted to set a standard where people would not be taken advantage of. The second thing is, if this really does take off in Ohio, the 4 initial port authorities that are on the executive committee, the cooperative agreement calls for earmarking funds to set up a fund for people that would fall below this score but don't have the opportunity to qualify for home energy assistance or something like that. So that's going to take some time, but that's really the truthful answer I can give you.
Okay, thank you.
Excellent, thank you. Any more questions from the committee? Any more questions from members of council? What's your desire?
On consent agenda.
Can I get a motion for consent? Motion for consent. Can I get a second? Second. All in favor? Thank you. Very well.
Thank you.
A final piece to come before Economic Development Committee. Item number 17, authorizing the mayor or his designee without the formality of publicly advertising for bid to enter into a contract or contracts with Submittable for access to submittable.com platform and declaring an emergency.
Thank you, Councilwoman Sims. My name is Alyssa Gregg. I work for the Office of Integrated Development. We are asking to receive authorization to purchase a submittable.com account. Submittable allows us to accept, review, and make decisions on any kind of digital content using a cloud-based submissions manager. This will be a 3-year agreement for a one-time amount of $17,968.50. This pricing includes appropriate server capacity, 10 reassignable reviewer accounts, and as many separate applications as we want to include. The platform will expedite our applications process from start to finish and improve our communications process with all of our applicants. It's purchased with our upcoming Rubber City Match program in mind. The volume of the applications we actually expect to receive submittable will make that entire review process run a lot smoother. We have used this on a trial base thus far. We've used our facade grant program application, our CDC support program, and it currently houses our Great Streets microloan application as well. I've enjoyed using it. I found it to be simple, at least from the reviewer standpoint. So that's what I've got for you.
Thank you, Ms. Alyssa. Again, to you, thank you for taking calls this morning and just my impromptu appearance in your office. I appreciate how thorough you were. I didn't know if Mr. James, you want to talk about a little bit about how important a piece is for our efforts to be more integrated.
Certainly. So as Ms. Gregg talked about, what the real magic of Submittable is that it allows us almost unlimited capacity to share reviewer capabilities with stakeholders. So as we roll out the programs that we've worked on with many of you, including maybe hopefully one day getting NPP, the City Council MPP on this program is too, it allows for all of those reviewers to do things digitally and electronically and very quickly. So, and it's all in one place. So we don't have to be looking for someone's application and figuring out if someone reviewed it. It's a nice, smooth process.
Would you liken this to almost like a Google Doc that everybody can access and kind of look at? I know you have like 10, you can have 10 users at any given time, but they can all have access to.
They don't edit each other's reviews or anything. We have the capacity to upload a pre-programmed form for them to fill out, as well as make comments that each other can see. And then we can download their reviews from the form and their comments and run statistics through the website based on, what percentage of reviewers said this and what percentage of applicants checked this particular box. So,
thank you. Any questions from the committee? Any questions from members of council? Councilman Fusco.
Thank you. I know if any ward council members or any council members at all got a complaint from a developer in terms of how long it's taken to get through the review process, this is exactly what the doctor ordered, and it's wonderful to hear. I would like to request that my name be added to this. This is going to help in terms of economic development too. Well done.
Mr. Clerk, if you can make sure you add Councilman Fusco's name.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions from the committee? Any questions from members of council? What's your desire?
Consent agenda.
Can I get a motion for consent? Can I get a second? All in favor? Thank you very much. There's nothing else to come before economic development. We are now adjourned.
Okay, next is budget and finance. So we get together in 1 minute. 1 minute.
Linda, Mike, Linda, still Linda. Dinah, right. But I know who I am. You don't.
11.
Yeah.
Okay, I like her. I'm going to be her. Can I be her behind her?
Councilwoman.
Are you sitting higher than me?
You have that too.
Seems so low.
And I don't have one in color. Might have to, I know what the changes are though.
Good afternoon. I'd like to call the Budget and Finance Committee meeting to order. Do I have a motion to accept the minutes from the last meeting? I have a motion and a second. All in favor, let it be known by saying aye. Opposed, like sign. All right, thank you so much. We have nothing on the old agenda, correct?
I don't believe so.
Okay, thank you. We do have 2 items, but before we read in any legislation, we are going to, Mr. Fricker, I believe, have a presentation.
Correct. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So we do have 2 pieces before the committee today. Both are related to the labor agreements that we've been working on for the past several months. One of the pieces is considered wages, and the others deals with our health care benefits. So the bulk of the changes, or the more complex changes, have to do with our health care benefits. So we're going to have Wendy Weaver kind of go through the various items that are in the agreement.
And benefit changes?
Yes.
For the record, the committee is receiving handouts even as we speak. Thank you.
Okay, good afternoon. Wendy Weaver, Benefit Manager for the City of Akron. So I just wanted to go through the... Is it on? Oh, now it's on? Oh, sorry. Okay, Wendy Weaver, Benefit Manager with the City of Akron. Good afternoon. So I just wanted to go through the changes and kind of what's highlighted in yellow on the benefit summary sheet that does the side-by-side comparison of the current plan, and then the benefit plan for 2020, and then the benefit plan for 2021. So for 2019, there will be no benefit plan changes. And in 2020, we're proposing to introduce Paladina, which will be a direct primary care option for employees. And we can provide some additional information if you have questions about Paladina. We are going to offer a healthcare and dependent care spending account to employees. So this is where employees can set money aside pre-tax, and then they will be able to be reimbursed for eligible healthcare expenses or dependent care expenses. So this will be a nice benefit. The deductible for healthcare expenses is increasing from $125 to $150. The out-of-pocket maximum, so once a member pays their deductible, they then pay 20% in coinsurance. That is changing to $1,500 for single, $3,000 for family, and that's for in-network coverage. One of the other changes to that is that the way the out-of-pocket works today, it's just coinsurance. Effective January 1st of 2020, the out-of-pocket maximum will include coinsurance and any copays. So it will include office visit copays, prescription copays, ER copays. So any copay, any out-of-pocket expense will now be included in that out-of-pocket maximum. The specialist office visit copay changing to $40 per visit. And then on that first page, the last change is the non-emergency care in an emergency room. That copay is changing to $200. The majority of our emergency room are true emergency, but there's still a few that people are going to for non-emergency care in the ER. And then if you skip to the third page, the next page doesn't have any changes on it. And then the last page, we get into some prescription benefit changes. So for copays for prescriptions for a 30-day supply, generic would be $10, preferred brand will be $20, and then non-preferred would be a $40 copay.
Those are increases from what we currently pay. And then we are adding another tier, a specialty tier. So anyone taking a specialty medication would pay a $50 copay. And then we have another copay added for a specific drug, Cialis. And then for mail order, it's going to be 2 times the copay for a 90-day supply. So employees that do mail order for maintenance medications would pay 2 times the copay and save 1 month's copay by doing that 90-day supply. So with that benefit of saving that copay, we are moving to a mandatory maintenance choice program. So the way that the mandatory maintenance would work is that an employee who takes maintenance medication would need to get their medication filled for a 90-day supply, and they could get it filled at a CVS, brick and mortar, so they could go to a retail pharmacy store, but CVS only, or they could do mail order. So currently employees can do 90-day supply, but they can go anywhere. So with the mandatory maintenance choice, we'll get more savings if they only utilize CVS at the retail or use the mail order program through CVS. And that would be mandatory for any maintenance medication. And then we're moving to an advanced control formulary. So the formulary would be changing. And then we have one more change at the out-of-pocket maximum level, where it's just detailing again that the out-of-pocket maximum does cover medical and prescription, co-pays, co-insurance, all out-of-pocket. So once a member hits that out-of-pocket maximum, their expenses that are covered under the plan would be covered at 100% for the rest of the year. Okay?
Yeah, and just to add on to the different items in the agreements that Wendy just talked about, these changes are expected to generate about $5.7 million in savings starting in 2020. So because these benefit changes don't take place until next year, there won't be any savings the first year, but we should save about $2.8 million in 2020 and about $2.9 million in 2021.
Say that one more time.
Okay, so there's about $5.7 million of savings through the plan design changes that we're making.
For the next 2 years?
Starting next year, right.
Okay.
So there are no changes for this year. Okay. All the changes that Wendy talked about go into effect in 2020.
Okay, thank you.
So if you look at the last page of that handout with the healthcare, the one in yellow where it says contributions, you notice what the contribution change will be for contribution from the employees into this plan. Starting August 1st, we're a little behind, so that may move now till September 1st or later. The change, which was negotiated with the unions, will be from the current 30 to 60 to 40 to 80, which that would be 40 single, 80 family. Then going effective January 1st, 2020, that will move from the 40/80 to $55 for individuals, $110 for family, and then effective 2021, we move into a $60 for families and $60 individual, $120 for families. So that's the contribution level. As you might note before, when we talked about health care in 2016, we had a graph that showed us going off the cliff. If you look at some of the handouts I gave you now with those graphs, we are going level, and hopefully in the future we'll start to move down. Because we've moved into where other political subdivisions are in the state with regard to contributions and the health care, we still maintain in one of the best health care systems for our employees in the state of Ohio, and still one of the cheapest for their contributions. So we're very happy that we were able to maintain that level for our employees, but also start to help with the taxpayers by moving us back up to where we need to be as a percentage goes for contributions. One of the exciting parts of this, and I am very excited about this is a game changer in the healthcare for our employees and for
our healthcare costs, and that is the Paladina system, which we have negotiated to provide for our employees. Do you want to introduce Paul?
Mm-hmm.
So we have somebody from Oswald here today to explain to you in basic terms what the Paladina system is. So, Paul, could you give your name and spell it for the record for us, please?
Just want to make sure this is working. This is on.
Yes.
Good afternoon. I'm Paul Catania. I'm Senior Vice President with Oswald Companies, based here in Akron. It's a pleasure to be invited to introduce to you all the direct primary care strategy through Paladina Health. This is something that, since Oswald Companies has been working with the city since mid-2018, we've introduced to the city. It is it's not managed care. I'll define what direct primary care is in a second, but the whole purpose is to not only contain and ultimately reduce the cost of health care, but also increase the experience, improve the experience, and reduce the cost of health care for the members, the patients, the employees, and families that utilize it. This concept, this strategy, has been adopted throughout the country for the last 9 years, and it's been introduced in Ohio here just in the last 4 years. And Akron specifically, it's been adopted just in 2018 by the Akron Public Schools. They've been on record with that in their own meetings, and it's being adopted by multiple other employers in the area. It is an employer-sponsored healthcare strategy. This is not something individuals can buy. It's not an insurance product by any means. It's not offered by any insurance company. This is Paladina Health is a firm that's based out of Denver, and they provide clinics accessible to their employer-based clients to allow their employees and families to access their clinics pretty much on a subscription basis. So an employer like the city would offer to its employees the access to Paladina clinics, and they would then build, construct, lease space based upon the geographic access points that are applicable to the employees enrolled, as well as their family members. And then those employees and family members would have 24/7 access to the physicians, providers, and staff of those clinics. The clinics are not open 24 hours. However, each participant enrolled would have the cell phone number and 24/7 access to the providers that service that clinic. The reason they're able to offer that level of access is because there's a limited number of patients assigned to each physician. In typical healthcare, primary care, a physician might have 3,000 to 4,000 patients assigned to them in their panel. In this particular environment, they're capped between 750 and 800, which gives the physician a lot more time and devotion to each individual patient. And we're not talking 800 families. We're talking about 800 people. So if a spouse and an employee and their spouse are both enrolled and they choose the same clinic and the same doctor, that's 2 individuals. So it's a subscription-based model. So what's in it for the member is unfettered access to a physician. They average appointment times are 45 minutes, not 6 minutes. They have dedicated concierge-type medical services provided to them through their dedicated primary care physician. They could still see any specialist and still be referred to any hospital system, including both SUMA, Akron General, Akron Children's. In fact, we've met with all the representatives of those organizations, and they understand the program. And there's no insurance company that is involved with the processing of claims. Any services provided to these individuals, there would be no claim form submitted to any carrier or no claim cost passed back to the city. The subscription fee that is paid on a monthly basis for those who voluntarily enroll covers the cost of these services through the course of the year. These physicians are employed by Paladina Health. They are not employed by any hospital system, so there's no allegiances or competitive nature related to where referrals should be made. And this is critical because part of the experience is to make sure that every individual gets the best, most valuable experience. They need to go to the right provider for the right reasons at the right cost. And if they're going to be receiving services outside of Paladina Clinic, then they need to be paying the right amount, so their deductible amount and their coinsurance goes even further. So if the best place to get an MRI is down the street versus around the corner, then that doctor's going to know that and refer them appropriately. So as I mentioned, there's no co-pays to the members, there's no coinsurance, there's no claim forms. That improves that experience, and the focus on them through these doctors, and we've seen it firsthand through Akron Public Schools, has been exceptional. The city benefits by basically trading a variable claim cost, which is something that the city has experienced thus far in traditional healthcare, for a fixed cost. So without the inflation of claims year over year, now they're able to pay up upfront subscription fee and then see increased preventive care, see increased overall cost transparency through where referrals are being made, and improve the overall employee experience. And what we've found, the math has proven it on 3 other clients that we've introduced this to over the last 3 years, is the first year, typically we see a break even, and then from there, the hockey stick of cost containment and savings goes to the point where if we can get up to, say, 30% enrollment, the actual trend line for healthcare costs in any large employer like the city will actually go down. Not something we easily talk about in healthcare. Any questions?
How would you like to, we want to address these questions, then come back to you. I'm going to kind of defer to you on that, as far as the question.
Yeah, why don't, if there are questions certainly about the Paladina portion of the package, why don't we have those addressed now?
Okay. Questions from the committee? Ms. Mobian.
I'm trying to understand the difference between this and
A microphone, please. Thank you.
Sorry, Mr. Chair. I'm trying to understand the difference between this and a managed care company. And while you're holding on to that question, where are you going to get all these doctors from who can have these low caseloads?
Right. Both great questions. So yes, not to be confused with managed care. Managed care, which was introduced back in the, going back all the way to the 70s, but really had its high point in the 90s, was all about insurance companies capping the reimbursements they would make to certain narrow network of providers. So they would guarantee upfront payment to doctors for treatment they have not given yet. Sounds similar to what I'm talking about. However, they were owned by the insurance companies. So the insurance companies had a vested interest in actually limiting the amount of expenses associated with those capitation agreements. This is employer-sponsored direct primary care in that we are simply paying Paladina for a fee to employ and deliver health care with their promise to do it in a manner that's going to be more proactive and contain and reduce utilization over the long term. So their profit margins are based upon their subscription fees, and they don't deal with insurance companies, they don't deal with insurance claims. They're only there to provide a whole host of acute primary care needs. They're not doing surgeries in these centers. However, they are doing a whole host of things that normal primary care physician offices simply are not paid to do. If you go into a current primary care physician through any host of health systems and you present more than one symptom, many times they'll treat your initial symptom and make another appointment for you to come back and get the second symptom treated. This is really antithetical to what this program is all about. They're there to make sure they're treating the whole patient from day one and not paid through any capitated narrow network whatsoever. In fact, it's supposed to broaden the network. They're supposed to give you access to providers that you might not otherwise be referred to in an effort to contain costs for the patient and the employer. Second, where do we find these doctors from? Here we are in Northeast Ohio with, we're a hospital environment. Who would ever want to join this type of program when they can be with all the other very influential health systems out there? It may be surprising to you, but we've learned very quickly in talking to the physicians that Paladina has recruited and staffed, doctors thrive in this environment. There is a host of doctors that are looking for this type of environment in order to deliver the care that they were trained to do. They don't have to deal with the insurance companies. They don't have to deal with insurance paperwork. They don't have to deal with a lot of the red tape. It gives them over 30% of their time back to treat patients, and with their ability not to be on the clock with turning patients over and referring to the big health systems, they really are able to make a bigger difference. And there's been no delay in Paladina recruiting doctors in Northeast Ohio. We have over 7 clinics right now, 7 and soon to be 8 clinics built, and there's been over 16 doctors and nurses and providers associated with those, and there's been no delay in bringing them on. Most of the doctors are coming from the large health systems in and around our community.
I can't follow. So if you currently have a physician that you've been seeing that's part of a network, if you go with Paladina, you would have to leave that network and go with Paladina, unless that doctor, chances are that doctor is not going to leave that network, I wouldn't imagine, but is that the case?
Yeah. So to join Paladina, it's a voluntary, as I mentioned, so every individual will have the ability to decide for themselves if they want to join Paladina. They would then have their primary care doctor assignment be through Paladina. Paladina then would have access to their records. There are circumstances certainly where women and other folks that have specialists that they see in addition to their primary care doctor, they can certainly keep those as well. To be active in Paladina and to be enrolled in Paladina, you simply have to make a preventive care appointment in your first, and there's lots of different process things that we're going to work out, whether it's 6 months or 12 months. You have to see the doctor. You can't just, not use them. We're paying a subscription fee. There is a general rule that if you're going to enroll, you're going to get a call from Paladina to say thank you for enrolling. We'd like to introduce you to your doctor and have you choose your doctor, have you choose your clinic, and build that relationship. And if that's not completed in a certain amount of time, then simply they are disenrolled. Otherwise, you're wasting the city's time and energy and money in that regard. So there is a change. You don't have to fire any doctors. If someone's not using Paladina, though, they can be disenrolled based upon the agreement.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I'm sure several of us have a lot of questions, but we're not sure exactly what the questions are yet. I wanted to come back and come back to you, Mr. Catania. The numbers that you gave us, are those affected whatsoever by what we're contributing if this service would be used?
Yeah, those savings numbers are inclusive of a basic level of enrollment in Paladina. So yes, those are, we are factoring in some savings from enrollment in Paladina in these numbers that were given.
Okay, but these numbers would not change if I would opt out, if I would choose not to. These numbers remain the same?
I mean, we're counting on a certain level of enrollment in the first years. We would hope that would ramp up. So, okay, assuming that we get a certain base level of enrollment, we should see some savings over the life of this contract.
Okay, what's the assumed or hoped for percentage?
I believe it was 20%.
Yeah. That's the first year or over 2 years?
That was the first year, and that's based on Akron Public Schools experience and experience with other public employers that they've seen this system, and they've had toward 20%. I think Akron Public Schools now, Paul, is...
Yeah, when this was first introduced, and similar to the city, they took the time to introduce this strategy to the union in a collaborative effort. And as a result, literally in the first 60 days, Akron Public Schools had over 1,600 enrolled out of a potential 7,000. And similar here in that the enthusiasm and interest and homework done by both parties, we definitely see an interest level that would compare there. And Paladena has shown us as well to start at least that 15 to 20% range initially in the first 12 months and ramp up to 35 to 40% in the first 3 years is not unusual or unexpected.
So the physicians, they are employed by you?
So Oswald Companies, we are an independent advisor to employers.
I should restate that. They're employed by Paladena?
Correct. They're employed, fully staffed by Paladena, salaried employees.
So I, as employee of the city of Akron, I decide, you know what, I want to switch physicians. I've had this physician now. Does the request come from Paladena to my physician? Please send over the records. How?
Yeah, it really is easy for the patient in this case. Paladena does the reach out. You know, the patient doesn't have to go find Paladena. Paladena is going to contact them. It could be online. It could be through the phone. It could be come in, visit, see, meet the doctor first. It's not like a sight unseen type of situation. Once that meeting takes place and the individual enrolls, then there is a question, there's a meeting with the doctor that says, okay, now who was your other physician, where I might be able to access historical records. In some cases, if they don't have one, and that we see that a lot, there's a huge percentage of folks that don't have a relationship with a physician, which is part of the problem. So there's that. So there's no really record to go find. But for those of us that have had a primary care physician that are looking for a better way, then yes, here's my doctor's name and number. They can get you all my files, how many years that goes back, and the patient doesn't have to go do that themselves.
Okay. Question, Ms. Keith.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My first question is on the second page that I have here, the handout. It says TMI, I believe, under weight loss, which I really wouldn't want anyone to know my weight if I were trying to lose it. So maybe that's TMI, but organ transplant, drugs, and biologicals. Can you tell me what the TMI might stand for?
I can answer that one.
It's
actually TMJ.
It's actually CMJ.
Temporomandibular
TMJ.
joint disorder. It's a jaw TMJ.
Oh, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that's underneath there. And, thank you, is there anything about addiction? Other boards that I am on, it's very costly for our services that we give to people that are suffering from an addiction. Is there anything in here that I'm missing that you would service someone with an addiction?
On behalf of Paladena, that issue is front and center to how they treat pain, and they actually, in their first interview with any potential patient, talk about all different types of utilization of prescription drugs and how they might treat pain. So we've seen that. We've seen actually a drop in opioid use in the 3 other clients that we've had the Paladena providers with, and they measure that very specifically for us. That's on the Paladena side. I know that on the prescription drug management side that services all participants, there's a heightened sense in plan design with regards to controls related to drugs, and the state is managing that as well. So all parts of the plan designs, all parts of all health plans are being monitored very closely in that regard. They're not all perfect yet, but certainly there's a lot more attention on that.
And I apologize because I might have stated the question way too broadly. So I'm going to restate it, hoping I can get to it. If I'm on your plan and I have a child, I'm on the family plan, and I have a child who suffers from addiction, maybe alcohol, maybe heroin, whatever the case may be, and they, many times, they are placed into a facility, okay, to get better help one-on-one. Is that covered somewhere here in this plan that I do not see?
I'll take that one. Yes.
Thank you.
It is. It's covered under basic hospitalization. So this 3-page summary is really just a brief summary. It doesn't detail out and encompass every single benefit that we do cover, but that is something that we do cover.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.
Yes, please.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to give like a real-life type of example on why I think this is a game changer for the healthcare.
Please.
And do it in layman terms, so that I, like a simple person, understood it. You take a situation that happens quite frequently in the winter. A person who has a number of children. One of the children gets a sore throat. They don't take that child to the doctor right away, hoping it's just a cold and a sore throat, and that it will go away. But that turns into strep throat. And now their other children have sore throats. And now this, because they didn't take them to the doctor, because they didn't want to pay the copay, now that turns into an emergency or a hospital situation. Under the Paladina system, they have no copays. You can go to the doctor as many times as you want to go, and it's not going to cost you 1 penny out of pocket. So now you're going to take all 3 kids to the doctor and say, doctor, this one's got a sore throat, I'd like to check the other ones, can we see that? Now we nip that in the bud about whether or not they have strep throat or not, and all of a sudden we don't have those emergency visits. These children are healthier, and quite frankly, it's my belief that this whole system, once people join this, and I think Paul will attest to this and some of the other people because we talked about it, it actually saves lives. It saves lives because people go to the doctor. People who haven't been to the doctor for years have to sign up and go and get a physical. And during the course of that physical, things are discovered like high blood pressure, diabetes, things that should have been taken care of years ago. Well, now they're going to start being taken care of because it's not costing them anything out of their pocket, not 1 cent out of pocket. So that's why I say this is a game changer, because people will use the facilities, they'll use the doctor, and they'll get healthier. So
I would like to make one more clarification, if I may.
Yes.
Paladina doesn't replace Medical Mutual. So Medical Mutual is still your health plan if you're enrolled in Paladina. So you would use Paladina as your primary care, and then if you needed to see a specialist or get prescriptions, you would still be under the Medical Mutual plan. That Paladina doctor is going to refer you to Medical Mutual specialists and help you manage that care. So I want to make that clear that it isn't you're enrolled in Paladina and you're out of Medical Mutual. None of that network changes for our employees who enroll in Paladina.
You'd said it first, it's a primary care initiative, but it's easy, it's easy to miss that.
Right.
Thank you.
And if I may, not to interrupt at all, but Randy made a very important point, and Wendy did too, in clarifying that this is a plan enhancement. This layers on top of what you have in your plan design that's in front of you right now. But the statistics that we've seen come out of our client utilization, if the employees and their families don't appreciate and value the experience they have, this plan doesn't work, okay? Because if the plan isn't used, it's just sunk cost, and you're still going to have the same sicknesses and illnesses. But what we have found is identifying individuals with multiple risk factors is the utmost priority by these clinics, and the number of visits by individuals with more than 2 risk factors is 4 times the prevalence than those when they're not on this type of direct primary care model. So those that need health care the most receive it more proactively, to Randy's point, and those statistics have been well documented, which made us at Oswald really turn our heads on this and really dive into the nitty-gritty. And like I said, this is an employee benefit. It's not a cost-cutting measure. It has to be a win-win for this really to work, and so we're proud to share it with you.
Did I hear somebody say that, or maybe you said, that the individual is required to see the physician once during the year?
That is the expectation of the plan. There are rules that any employer can put in place to say if you don't see the doctor in this program, it defeats the purpose because we're paying for it throughout the year for someone to have the access. Those rules have not been defined yet. We've not, gotten to that state, but that is the general idea, to get individuals to at least see the doctor once a year.
And we encourage our employees to get an annual preventive exam anyways. It's covered at 100% under the benefit plan. So the encouragement would be go to see that Paladina doctor for at least an annual physical, and then the time that you get to spend there with that physician is going to be a lot more in-depth and detailed than what you get with the 5 minutes that you spend with your current primary care. So Paul, what's the average?
45 minutes. The first appointment typically takes about an hour. Average appointment time is 45 minutes. And there's only 8 appointments per doctor throughout the day. I mean, so they schedule it. They don't have a waiting room because they expect 3 people to cancel, and they need to make sure that they have
8 appointments
a doctor schedules 8 per day.
per day.
Now, they also have emergent hours. They also, you can reach that doctor, they can fit you in as needed, but they schedule appropriately knowing that they're not trying to see 8 patients per hour.
How many physicians did you say right now?
Well, there's over 16 medical staff staffing 7 active clinics. Those are physicians.
And the clinics are located?
Right now, there's clinics based in Akron, North Canton. Our next one where I've identified is going to go up north Route 8 towards Cuyahoga Falls in that area. We identify the locations for the clinics where people live. Okay, so Akron Public Schools has identified one of their own facilities in downtown. There's one on White Pond. We've identified North Canton that's open this spring. So we're going to continue to do the geo-access for the city, and we'll determine exactly where the next best clinic should go with the city. Now, the city can access virtually any of the clinics in Northeast Ohio. So there's more clinics by Brecksville, sorry, as well as the east side and west side of Cleveland. So it started up there and in Mentor as well. First employers that adopted this were up by the lake in Mentor, and we're glad that it's now being discussed around Summit County.
Samples?
Thank you. I have a few questions. You said that this doesn't replace medical mutual, it just lies on top of it. So you're paying 2 separate fees. Are you paying medical mutual and Paladina, like co-pays, or you haven't paid our monthly for our insurance, you pay one for them as well? Or?
Yeah, so we pay a monthly administrative fee to medical mutual, and then for those employees who enroll in Paladina, we would pay a monthly fee to Paladina for that member.
Second one, this may be for you. There's a term called concierge medicine.
Yes.
Is Paladina sort of aligned with that focus?
Yes. The concept of concierge medicine initially was introduced for higher income individuals that would pay a fee for an annual access to their doctor so they can call any time. This Paladina model is very similar to that, but it's intended for all employees of an employer, not just those that necessarily could afford it.
Okay. And then the last one is, I noticed down here where it says ACA routine well child exams, immunizations. Does this program satisfy the Affordable Care Act requirements? Because you know how in the end you're doing your taxes and it says, do you have your insurance? And if you know,
yes,
there seems to be a fee attached to that. Does this satisfy that requirement?
Yeah, so this, again, the Paladina is not an insurance plan, so it's not considered insurance coverage. It is a healthcare delivery model, but the MMO plan design does qualify under the ACA in all areas.
Okay, right. Thank you.
Your questions or comments? Please, Ms. Mobian.
Can you talk about your doctors? Are you talking about seasoned doctors, or these are new graduates, or what are you finding to staff your facilities with?
Yes, so I can share some of their profiles with you happily. Dr. Thomas was the first one we brought in as part of the White Pond location. can't speak exactly for Dr. Thomas's age, but I'm pretty certain she's in her mid-50s. She's been a practicing general family practitioner for over 30 years. And she was ready to just get out of the mainstream primary care environment that was she in, laden with the paperwork and the referral requirements, frankly. I interviewed her personally because she was our first physician that we're bringing in for Akron Public Schools at the time, and I wanted to make sure that, I was convinced as I'm talking about this with my clients that I understood what their intentions were and why they would be coming to Paladina. We've since brought on 4 more just in the Akron area. Dr. Morgan has become the medical director. Again, she has more than 17 years experience in her craft and has become, frankly, I'll use the word beloved by her patients. She actually, she has hours in both the North Canton facility as well as in Akron. And there was a lot of questions because she was spending 2 days a week in Canton. Where did Dr. Morgan go? We want her to be here all the time. And a lot of the patients chose actually to go to Canton because they live down that area. I don't know any physicians that Paladina has brought on without, gosh, at least 6 to 8 years of general practice already in another health system. We have recruited 2 doctors that were moving to the area anyway. They had offers from other places, and Paladina got wind of them coming to town and were able to recruit them away. Inexperience is not the issue at all. Sorry.
What about APNs? Are you hiring any advanced practice nurses?
Yes. There are physician assistant in one location. There are RNs, multiple RNs in all locations, as well as the administrative team. So I can't speak directly to all the certifications for all of the clinicians, but I have seen various licensure for all of the RNs and physician assistants as well.
So your PAs have their own caseload?
They do see patients in addition to the doctors, yes.
Okay. Just one more question, Mr. Chair. How diverse? I'm just going to put it out there. I have this black female that I see who is my primary care physician that I love. And matter of fact, a lot of people love her. And I feel every time I see her that I get individualized attention. And I have never felt slighted at all. Certainly. And I can make an appointment to see her whenever I need to. And she's part of a network. I can't tell you how many patients she sees a day, but I can tell you that she gives good quality care. Her waiting room is never overflowing. She does have steady appointments, but I get in shortly after I get there. So that's a question for you for 1 minute. If I choose to stay with a person like that, I'm just using myself as an example, that would be out of network, or how would that be covered? The same?
Again, your plan will stay exactly
the same
as what you have today, just with the plan design changes that are, proposed in this summary. So it won't affect you at all. So, for your situation, if you love your doctor, you're getting the care that you need, and you want to stay there, you just would continue to pay your copays, and it's business as usual for you, basically.
Okay. Now you can answer the question about diversity of your staff.
Yeah, I've personally met all of the physicians. I can tell you that the diversity of the group ranges from, we have an Asian American male, we do have African American female, we have Dr. Song has been, I know she's also Asian American. We have an Indian American female up in Brecksville. So clearly there's a lot of diversity within their staff, but they find the highest quality physicians they can possibly find.
Good. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments for this portion from Mr., is it Catania?
It's Catania, thank you.
Yes.
Well done.
Thank you very, very much.
Thank you, it's a
and
pleasure.
I look forward to the future here, and Mr. Fricker will come back over on this side.
Okay, yeah, go ahead and we can read the legislation in at this time, and I'll address the wage ordinance after it's read in.
Okay, very good. My computer shut down, so I'm going to read it from Mr. Hoax here. All right, here we go. This ordinance approving the agreements between the Fraternal Order of Police, Akron Lodge Number 7, Local 1360, the Ohio Council 8 of the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees Bargaining Units, and the City of Akron regarding adjustments in employee compensation, providing for these adjustments in compensation to apply to all employees in the non-bargaining management and unclassified job classes as well, all in furtherance of the mayor's commitment to attract and retain qualified employees and provide appropriate wage increases commensurate with improved employee productivity and efficiency and changes in the cost of living while economically utilizing taxpayer dollars to provide vital quality services to the citizens of the city of Akron and declaring an emergency.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The first thing I'd like to say is that this piece of legislation is identical to the piece that was introduced last week, with the exception that the CSPA bargaining unit is now included in this legislation. So all we did was add them in. The piece deals with the cost of living adjustments for the FOP, for ASME, for CSPA, for non-bargaining, for management, for the unclassified employees, and for the civil service commissioners. The wage increases are identical for all of those groups. So in 2019, there will be a 2% cost of living increase. That matches what we budgeted for 2019, so we don't have to make budget adjustments for a different cost of living increase. Those were budgeted for 2019. For 2020, the wage increase will be 2.75%, and for 2021, the wage increase will be 3%. Also, I should say that for 2019, we will do those retroactively back to the beginning of the year.
Correct. Questions or comments from the committee members? Ms. Amobian?
I just want to make sure, the last week when we asked, so all of the bargaining groups are now included in this?
With the exception of fire.
Fire. So we still have one more.
It's all the bargaining units and non-bargaining, with the exception of fire.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? And that we've just received this.
Right, so we would like to pass this next week.
Understood, because we are off.
This week, we would like to take time.
Okay, so I would encourage any and all, either committee members or council members, to reach out to the appropriate individuals this week. We would like to have this passed before we take our August recess. Thanks to everyone that's here, and I know there's many, 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 many hours that have gone into this, and we appreciate what you do, and we would like to come back to this next week. So we have a motion to refer and a second. All in favor to refer this to our regular agenda? Aye. Opposed? All right, we will refer this to our regular agenda. And again, all committee or council members, please direct your questions to the appropriate individuals so we can move this along next week. Thank you. We do have another item. Thank you. I would have bypassed that very easily. So, All right, this is an ordinance authorizing the mayor or his designee to enter to a grant agreement or agreements with United Disability Services and declaring an emergency. Who will be speaking on this?
I'm sorry, could we go back, because I don't believe we read in the piece related to the medical benefit.
Oh, you know what? I apologize. That is not, I do not have that on my device.
Chairman, Mike?
Yes.
So I think what happened was it actually didn't get submitted, so that was the error, is there should have been two substitutes, one for the healthcare piece and one for the wage piece, both just to add CSPA. I think only one of them made it to council. So you read in everything that you have, but the law department is going to make sure that that is delivered to the clerk before the 7 p.m. meeting, so that by tonight you will have a substitute for both the healthcare piece and the wage piece. Again, that's just to add in the CSPA union.
That'll be ready for us this evening.
Right. So
okay,
that's
so
what
I can
Mr.
pull
Fricker's.
my committee tonight and.
To refer, again, same thing, just take an additional week's time, but they'll have that substitute for you.
Okay, thank you. Thanks so much. Okay, so we've just read in our other piece, United Disability Services, and who will be addressing that? Anyone in particular?
Yes, I will address that. So this is a grant that we give every 2 or 3 years to United Disability Services that provides a match for them to be able to buy transportation equipment to be able to transport people with disabilities. So we've done this. I think the last one that we did was back in 2016. This is an additional one that we'll be doing this year.
Okay, very good. Questions or comments? Wonderful. Please, if you could, please go ahead and just for the record, if you could go ahead and announce yourself.
Brian Thomas, CEO of UBS.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Thomas? You folks have been at it for, what, 60 or 70 years, I believe?
70 years this year.
Right. Congratulations. Yes. I'll come to Ms. Keith. There's a question.
Thank you, Mr. Thomas. First, for sitting through everything you sat through. I've seen you sitting there the whole time, so I did want you to get the podium for a few minutes. Can you give us just an idea of some of the things that you would like to do with this grant money, if you could give us?
Well, later this year, we will take possession of 9 new vehicles. 7 of those are transit vans, and 2 of them are buses. And we use these for a variety of purposes. We actually have a fleet of 40 vehicles that we use to transport people on a daily basis. Part of what we do is transporting people to and from our day programs, our core service of adult day services for persons with developmental disabilities. But in addition to that, we transport them to and from our programs as well as other day programs.
Sir, could you turn your microphone on up by the base of that? There you go.
Got
Thank
it.
you.
Yes. In addition to those services, those transportation trips to and from day services, we also have a contract with the Summit County Department of Job and Family Services, for whom we transport individuals who are served by them to and from non-emergency medical appointments. So that's that's the secondary use of our vehicles. We run about 800,000 miles per year and serve over 800 unique individuals with, I believe, about 12,000 trips, one-way trips.
May I ask one
Yes,
more question? This has nothing to do with the legislation. This has to do more with my curiosity. How many of these vehicles are staffed with volunteers that do the driving?
None. They are only driven by our employees,
Okay,
full-time or part-time. And these vehicles are also purchased with the help of FTA grants administered through Metro for AMATs, and they pay for 80% of the vehicles, and we have to make up the other 24%,
Okay, good.
or 20%, I'm sorry.
Thank you so very much.
Just administered by Metro?
Yeah, Metro is the fiscal agent, and the awards are through AMATs.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Ms. Amobian?
Now that you've shared something, I'm curious. So the net services that you provide,
Yes.
those are for anyone in need of transportation that will meet the qualifications of the NET program?
That's correct. So they may be people with disabilities,
Right.
they may be elderly, they may be low income and neither elderly nor with disabilities, but supported by Job and Family Services.
I didn't know you were on the list, but now that I do, look out. The other question I have, I know that you provide and I guess this is a means of supporting your budget, the lunch program?
Yes, Taste Buds, which is also in partnership with the county as
Okay.
we lease their kitchen at the Children's Services Bill.
And you deliver those?
We do.
Okay. So the funds that you get from the city of Akron, what will you be doing with those?
These will be supplementing the purchase of the 9 new vehicles.
Oh, that 20% that you have to?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I think the legislation says 80% is federal, and then our
Correct.
portion is the balance?
That is correct.
Okay.
Thank you.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
We've never met before. I apologize, but thank you very, very much.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Yes, sir.
Appreciate it.
Any other questions or comments? Consent, be okay?
Consent.
Motion for consent?
Have a motion and a second for consent. All in favor, let it be known by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, this item will be placed on the consent agenda and then passed next week. Okay, thank you. If there's nothing else to come before us, we are dismissed and adjourned. Thank you.